So I like to start off my classes when I start the school year with the two truths and a lie icebreaker. And inevitably, one of the things that I include in there is that I'm technically undead. And the kids never pick that one as a truth. So they're very surprised when they find out that their teacher had a less than 1% chance of survival rate and then immediately want to know more. My name is Scott Napolitano, and I am an aortic dissection survivor twice. Um, so, my life prior to dissections, I actually had an idea of the impact of aortic dissections because I have a very clear memory of the day that we lost John Ritter. I was a sophomore in college, and my roommate and I were just floored by what had happened. It was so sudden. But it wasn't one of those things that we had a family history of that I was aware of that I should be concerned about. I lived my life. I was a film and television student in college. I became a film and television teacher. I worked over the summers and became overly stressed and overly worked and, uh, you know, tried to live a fairly healthy lifestyle, but still was not aware of the ticking time bomb that I had going in my chest. And in the summer of 2015, I was really overworked with summer camps that were all film related. I had just finished up a stressful year teaching, and one day I woke up and I felt something was wrong. I had a really strong pain in my gut, and to my horror, I started to lose feeling in my legs. And I'm not a doctor, but there is a clue there that maybe something is going wrong and I should probably call for an ambulance. I was alone at the time in the most embarrassing kind of way. I'm wearing like my worst gym shorts and rattiest t-shirt. I don't think I'd had a shower the night before. Um, just the worst possible scenario. My keys are on the other side of the room. My wallet is somewhere buried in a pile of clothing. And now I have to call up an ambulance and say, I can't feel my legs. Can you guys come and get me? And then I had the realization I'm on the second floor of a townhouse. I need to get to the ground level and I can't move my legs, all the while trying not to panic. And when the guys got there, they did try and figure out what was wrong, and I was in pain, but not excruciating pain. And then they tried to get me to walk under my own steam. And my guys, I can't feel my legs. I'm really honestly afraid I'm going to break something because right now, from the waist down, there's nothing there. So they tried to kind of act as human crutches, and I'm not a skinny guy, so I'm sure it was awkward for everybody involved. They got me in a stretcher, took me to the local hospital, which was fortunately only about 5 minutes away from the apartments where I was living, and thus proceeded the great misunderstanding of 2015 for my life. I was brought in. It was a disgustingly hot day. It seemed like there were a million people at the hospital. And then I was promptly put on a gurney and stuck in a temporary room and told that it was probably just a pulled muscle, a herniated disc, probably nothing to worry about. And at one point, I have a very clear memory of a very frustrated nurse telling me that I was being overly dramatic and I just needed to calm down. So they gave me some painkillers eventually, and somehow to this day, I don't know exactly what happened, but I was able to recover enough to go home. They put me on some painkillers. I was put on crutches. I was told it was probably just a herniated disc, dismissed, went home, and was recovering for the rest of the summer into the fall. And that was the end of that. I was then treated for the next year for supposed damage in the lower part of my spine. And there probably was degradation there in, my spine, because as a film editor, you end up at your desk a lot and don't get to move much. So that was probably pre-existing. But what no one thought to look at was there maybe something else going on? So the summer after, summer of 2016, I'm only about 6 months out from my wedding. I wake up from a really realistic dream about Superman and Batman having a big fight, and I feel these really heavy punches in my dreams. I'm like, wow, that's realistic. This is a very intense dream. This is too intense of a dream. I don't even like Batman and Superman that much as a movie. So why am I calling this one back? And I woke up in mid dream going, this isn't right. And when I woke up, I felt those punches, but it wasn't from the dream. It was my heart tearing. I just didn't know it. So I thought maybe it was ingestion. I thought maybe I slept weird. I, have a tendency to toss and turn in my sleep. So I thought maybe I'd contorted myself because, I'm 32 years old now. I'm going to start feeling more pains that I didn't feel in my 20s and my teens. And wasn't that, wasn't gas. I hadn't eaten late. I went through a checklist of things that could have been, but aortic dissection never even crossed my mind. At this point, my wife just kind of rolls her eyes and shakes her head because I call for an ambulance. I tell them, I think I'm having a heart attack. And I'm very embarrassed by this because I've already been to the hospital once and told that I was being dramatic, but tell them I probably should get over to the hospital soon because I'm having a hard time breathing. And last time that something like this happened, I couldn't feel my legs. So I'm going to meet you guys at the bottom of the stairs. Please hurry. Then I call my wife and tell her, I'm going to the hospital again. I'm so sorry. You don't have to come and get me. I'm sure it'll be fine, which is really funny to her now. Probably wasn't as funny at the time. And now knowing what was going on, biggest understatement probably of our lives up to that point. So got to the hospital. They start checking me out for all the different symptoms that I'm showing, and they just don't understand what it is that they're looking at. At one point, they were ready to put me in an MRI, and I was freezing. I was shaking. I always believed that when you saw the cartoons, the character whose teeth are actually chattering, that was some kind of a over exaggeration. But my teeth would not stop chattering. I could not stop shaking. I don't know why, because again, it's August in New Jersey. It's about 95 degrees again, and here I am, just shaking uncontrollably. Um, they were ready at the hospital to send me home. They thought that I had a case of pneumonia and they kept me for a couple of days. I was there for, I believe, 2.5 days, and they were ready to discharge me. And fortunately, someone there must have looked over the Ritter rules or maybe processed the information differently than in previous looks at my medical history. And they said, we should probably send this guy to UPenn. Now, at this point, everybody is really trying to figure out what's going wrong with me. My mom had come out. My wife had obviously been in and out of the hospital constantly over the next couple of days. My best friend called and was scolding me for, being in the hospital, and made a joke about next time I better see you, you better be, on your feet. Made a joke about death, and then ever since then we've had that sort of, oh, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how nervous are we about my condition? Is it a death joke in the hospital level of concern? Fortunately, someone had the common sense to look over all of the symptoms from this trip to the hospital and the previous one, and they said we got to get him to UPenn. And honestly, I thought I was going to be going by an ambulance because Philadelphia is not that far from where I live in Hamilton, New Jersey. And the next thing I know, I'm being told, no, we need to get you down there immediately. We're taking you by airlift. That's not a good sign. It's not a good sign that they're calling in the helicopter to take you to safety. So there was so little time from that announcement to the airlift that my wife and mom went back to our apartment so that they could pick up a travel bag. And by the time they got back, they almost missed me going out to the helicopter. I was rushed to UPenn, and they analyzed me there. And they said, after a lot of concerned looks, we need to do open heart surgery now or you die. Not much of a decision to really make there other than say, okay. I weirdly felt, probably due to the fact that I hadn't slept at all in the last couple of days, I felt surprisingly calm. Um, the emotions wouldn't hit until much, much later. But the doctor who came in, Dr. V, my surgeon, said all this with absolute confidence, no voice shake, no trembling. He just looked me in the eye and said, "This is the best way to keep you going. And I think you'll be okay." So I said, "Let's do it." I remember being carted to the operating room. The last thing I remember uh, as they were putting me onto the operating table, I guess, was that I made some kind of crack about, well, don't worry, guys, if you screw this one up, just put me in like a Darth Vader suit, with the rebreather and the helmet, and my kids will get a kick out of that. And I think these guys are really confused why I'm cracking jokes as I'm about to be put into a major life-threatening situation. But humor, I guess, was my deflecting tactic. Um, but they said, count to 10, put the mask on, and I just know that as the gas started pumping, I just kept thinking, like, I don't want to go. I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet. And then I went under, and then everything kind of gets hazy. This is where I'm still struggling to put the pieces together of the next couple of days. But I've been told by my mother and my wife that when I was in recovery, they had a hard time taking the tube out of my throat. And they said, like, if we don't get him to wake up soon, like, we're going to have to do more work. And apparently when I heard this, my eyes shot open, and they were able to avoid having to do anything else. They had apparently handcuffed me so that I didn't, or restrain my wrists so that I wouldn't flail around too much, which I then absolutely did. I probably would have gone for any tubes they had in me. But I don't remember any of this. I vaguely remember waking up, and I vaguely remember hearing my mom and my wife speaking to me, but I don't have any clear memory of the first day of recovering. Um, I do remember that the nurses that were there were incredibly kind, and the people who were looking over me in the recovery room um, had infinite patience. I had enough wits about me at one point to tell them that my veins were notoriously bad, and I had been shot up like a pincushion with blood draws over the course of the week. So I know they probably had a hell of a time trying to get any blood out of me. So at one point they said they were going to bring in a vein finder for, like, it was for babies or for pregnant women, and I'm like, how does that work? And they ended up pulling blood out of like the top of my arm in a place like I've never had blood drawn before, and they're like, well, if we have to in an emergency situation, we can do this. That must have been like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, so this all becomes a haze. Um, but the recovery itself in the hospital is weirdly quick in my mind. I was there for about, I think, 3 or 4 days at UPenn. I was fortunate. I was in a room where there wasn't an additional person. I just lucked out that the hospital wasn't as occupied as it could have been. And my memory of the days after kind of come in and out. Um, Weirdly, I was more scared after the fact than I was going into it. I guess ignorance is bliss when you don't know the odds that are against you. I didn't find out till much later that they had my odds at less than 1% when they actually operated on me, and not even the 1%. So uh, that has led to many hours of introspection, wondering, why was I the lucky one? Why am I still here? Why did I get to walk away? And that was almost immediate. After I was in the recovery room, I started thinking this stuff through. I could not understand how I got that lucky. Um, it was scary. I mean, seeing the scar that was running up and down my chest, crusted in blood, which is something that I was not prepared for. It looked far worse than it probably actually was. Being told that I've got wires in my chest to keep the bones together, and I've never broken a bone in my life, so this is all very new to me. Um, It was a moment of deep gratitude to have the time that I'd asked for, but there was also that guilt of why did I get this gift? This became particularly apparent when I found out that the recovery ward I was in also had some people who were long-term stay patients, and some were not expected to make it. The hardest memory from that time period has nothing to do with my own recovery. It really has more to do with somebody else who was recovering. When they got me out of my hospital bed to walk around, there was a little girl who couldn't have been maybe more than 12 and looked like she was acting like my cheerleader because she saw me taking these steps down the hallway. And um, I remember her waving and saying, "Don't worry, it gets better, it gets easier, keep going." And even in the moment, I'm like, who's writing this script? But I remember seeing her a few more times as I was going up and down the hallway. I didn't find out till later on that she was not expected to live much longer. And that image has stuck with me every day since. So I was able to go home within a week. And then kind of came the great explaining of 2016, where suddenly everybody is wondering what happened to Scott, what's going on, hospital, near death, what? Because I'm 32 years old at the time and I have no previous history of any kind of major medical ailments, and there's nothing like this that anybody in my family can remember. So I have to deal with uh, my new headspace from post-surgery life. I am trying to explain what happened to a lot of my family members, a lot of my friends. I had to ask my wife while I was in the recovery room to reach out to my supervisor because we were only about a week away from school starting, and there was probably no chance of me getting back to school before September. So now he's confused, and fortunately, everybody was very understanding and accommodating, but it was a whirlwind of trying to understand something that I only just learned about. So Dr. V, an excellent surgeon who has gone on to leave UPenn and go to Yale, so guy who knows his things, explained the basics of what had happened. He asked, why didn't you tell us that you dissected previously? And I said, excuse me, what now? Pardon me? Yeah, well, we found out through the surgery that you had another dissection. That is something that we should have known beforehand. I didn't know what he was talking about. He had to explain that there's ascending and descending dissections, type A, type B. And, did I have any medical moments in the past that maybe felt similar to what I just experienced? And suddenly 2015 felt very different in my memory. So what I'd been told was a overdramatic reaction to probably a herniated disc was actually a dissection that I somehow walked off. He was confused by my lack of awareness, but he did say that people have been able to walk away from dissections and have them heal. It was just surprising that no one had looked into it more. I struggle with looking back on that time period because I can still see the nurse's face who told me that I was just being dramatic and to just calm down. And instead, I lived out a year. I had a very stressful year. And again, I'm planning my wedding, and I'm, graduating my first batch of freshmen. And it was a crazy summer. We just moved apartments. There was a lot of things going on under the surface. And here I was now having to recontextualize all this after the fact and learn about all these things in the moment that I can't do anymore. When I was told, well, there's a possibility that your lifting limit might be uh, left to like 10 pounds or less, but how am I ever going to lift a child then? I want to be a parent someday. I'm a filmmaker. How do I lift my equipment? 10 pounds is barely enough to get my groceries in the door. And I was told to take this slowly, that recovery is step by step. And I would go back and forth between these moments of panic where it's like, oh my God, everything has changed. And then there were moments of clarity and moments of zen where it's like, I'm just happy that I have more time to write my stories and I get to have this wedding. And it might not be the same wedding I was planning before, but it's going to definitely be a memorable one now for everybody who attends. I have more chances to go back and teach. And I felt incredibly guilty about having to leave my students hanging like this because no one knew what was going on. And the school obviously protects the privacy. So when I came back, there were teachers who thought that I'd quit. And my students hadn't heard anything. They just knew that I was in the hospital and that was that. So there is a whirlwind of activity that you don't even plan for that becomes apparent after you recover. And it took a while, but I eventually found Aortic Hope and dissection survivor groups on Facebook, and those became invaluable resources to just trying to understand what life would be and to understand that I wasn't alone, that my feelings of isolation, that my feelings of regret, um, this survivor's guilt was normal. Uh, these were things that I was sort of told at the hospital, but there are certain things that I was told probably at the hospital that I should know. That I still have to ask my wife, like, okay, remind me again, what were they talking about at this point? Because it just was so overwhelming. And that's one of the biggest things that I would pass along to any new survivors is just it will be overwhelming. Do not beat yourself up for not remembering everything. You are coping with a lot. So allow yourself fallibility. You will not be able to remember everything. If you are lucky, you will have someone in your life who can help you take notes and pay attention for you because you will go into this fog sometimes of I can't handle this. And if you've got therapy, if you've got uh, people in your life who will listen to you, that's invaluable. Um, I'm very fortunate that my wife immediately became a field general from pretty much the moment I went into the hospital of, okay, we've got to get all of your notes in a binder and we need to figure out what your new medication is going to be. We have to start looking at all of the different follow-ups. To this day, she's, Johnny on the spot when it comes to, making sure that I have my checkups every year. And if I feel any twinges, to have my cardiologist ready to rock and roll and on speed dial. But there is a level of self-advocacy that the more that you learn for yourself, the more secure you feel in the new status of your life. Uh, I was 32. I felt really, really young because I went to my cardiac rehab to go on the treadmill and lift my 5 pound, 3 pound dumbbells. And the people at the hospital were checking to make sure that I could maintain decent breath. And I'm not in the best shape. I am still struggling to lose weight, and I'm still trying to get into a better physical form. But even recovering a couple months after the surgery, lifting 3 pound dumbbells and walking on a treadmill at like 2 miles an hour felt like, whoop, this is really, really small baby steps. And everybody in the room is significantly older than me, and they're looking at me like I'm some kind of like candid camera spy. Uh, it was a different kind of reality that I was waking up into, and talking with other people in these groups and finding people who had survived the dissections made it more tolerable. So finding your people, it's so critical. Um, as time has gone on, there is this, and this might just be me. There has been a level of emotional armor, I guess. Thinking back on it, uh, there are moments that still make me emotional when I think back on where I was headspace wise. But I definitely have taken almost a comedian's approach to looking at it, because there are some absolutely bizarre moments during the course of the dissection that I had where this could have been my last day on earth. And instead, I got to live on. And I all I can do is just laugh and shake my head. Why am I telling my wife, no, it's okay, complete work, please? My heart is literally tearing itself into pieces. Stay at work. It's not that important. This is, I'm from New Jersey. Our roads are something out of Mad Max Fury Road. It's a situation where you will get cut off even by the little old lady that normally is, watering her flowers and waving at you. But if you're going too slow, she'll, flip the bird at you. But you get to the hospital, it's all of a sudden like, no, please, please, after you take your time, it's fine. My heart is imploding, but I want you to find that parking place. It's okay. Just please be very careful. Bizarre out of body experiences where I'm staring off into the hallway and I'm looking at a door and I'm like, that wall looks like it has a face. These drugs must be really good. But I'm definitely seeing a face in the wall. And then I talked to my wife later on. She says, "Did you see that like door over there? Doesn't it look like something out of Wizard of Oz? I swear there's a face there." I'm like, "Oh, thank God." Thought the morphine was really kicking today. Just things I can laugh at now that in the moment it was a much more tense time. Uh, Having a sense of humor about it makes it a little more tolerable for me, but it's also a little bit easier to explain to other people, because this is a really heavy subject. Um, I I wish I had known going in that the things I took for granted in life were going to be evolving. I love roller coasters. Um, I love going to Disney World and Six Flags, and you know, Twilight Zone Tower of Terror is like one of my favorite rides in the world. And I went to Florida one last time and did not realize that that would be the last time I'd be able to go on those rides. Uh, because as much as I enjoy some good G-force, I also enjoy my chest being intact and my heart not suddenly imploding like a dying star. So there are sacrifices that you will have to make, and I can live vicariously through a virtual reality headset, uh, recording of a roller coaster, and that'll have to suffice. But it's worth in the long run because I can still sit down and work on my stories, and uh, I can hug my wife at the end of the day. I can go visit my parents, and I can do these things that are much more valuable to me than the things that I lost. Certain hobbies, I was told, yeah, well, archery seems like a good idea, but the amount of vibrations here, maybe you want to avoid that. Or, I wouldn't take up boxing or martial arts anytime soon. It's like, okay, well, these are things that I wasn't even thinking of, but it's good to be aware that that's changing for me. Um, Also, I kind of wish I paid more attention to the early days of don't overdo your recovery. Be careful when you're doing your recovery. They will warn you against lifting too much or overexerting yourself, and uh, especially if you're on the younger side where you're feeling infallible, or you're feeling like, well, this is way too easy for me. I was told after my surgery to go walk around the block, uh, just very small loops, start around your apartment, then go, a little bit farther outside your apartment, and just keep it low key and see how you feel. And I definitely stretched it too fast, and I was wiped out. And then I would get frustrated because, well, I should be able to do this. Why can't I do this? And then, that's where the common sense little voice in your head is like, dummy, your heart is literally still stitched together. You probably should let it heal first before you just decide to start a marathon. Uh, so that is frustrating. There's a lot of things that will frustrate that, I wish I'd known going in. The level of misunderstanding of what an aortic dissection is, the level of frustration over the lack of understanding what an aortic dissection is cannot be calculated. I can't tell you how many times I was told, oh, well, thank God, I thought it was a heart attack. I'm like, no, a heart attack would have been better for me. But you know, thanks. I appreciate that. Um, I had one person tell me that the emotions that I was going through, the hardships I was going through, they compared it to uh, the the premature birth of their child, and like, well, they're the same. And I guess maybe there's some truth to that. But the complete dismissal of the life changing event I went through was very aggravating, and it's still aggravating. Um, I learned that I have to let some of these things go because some people just will not want to understand. They just don't get it. So um, I do my best to educate people around me. I was thrilled to see so many of my friends and family spreading around uh, the John Ritter page and the Aortic Hope page, and just spreading word about aortic dissection awareness month and things like that, because it was something that then got me thinking, my family doesn't go to the doctor all that often. That's one of those things where we are self-sufficient. Maybe dad should get checked out for this. Because now I'm being told by Dr. V, my surgeon, I'm being told by the people at UPenn, my geneticist, and it's weird to even have. It sounds like I've got like an agent, a manager, like I'm going off to Hollywood. Oh yeah, my geneticist called. I booked a new room in UPenn. Big crowd. They're all poking me and looking at me and taking pictures. It's weird. But you know, he's telling me like, this is genetic. Your family, you should definitely make sure that everybody gets looked at. And I told my father, I'm like, you should. You had some weird health stuff when you were younger, but you should probably get checked out for this anyway, just in case. And sure enough, later on, my father went to UPenn and they did find a dissection forming. It was small enough that could be medically managed, but with more time, and my father's not known for great stress management. So uh, it would have become a problem at some point. So now we're looking at dad going, okay, well, you have the same thing that I have. You didn't have it as quickly, but it was forming. Now we're thinking about my grandfather, his dad, and he died fairly young as well. And you start going up the family line, and it's amazing how many people that we're now looking at as, well, they died pretty young. Was it heart related? It was heart related. What are the odds it was an aortic dissection? They just didn't know what to call it. Um, so there is that importance for awareness to have family members checked out, and to uh, be aware of that, moving forward. Like if I'm lucky enough to have kids, I will be monitoring that from day one. uh, Things I would not have gone into life preparing for, now I have to be prepared for. And these are things I also learned, fortunately, from so many of the people in the support groups online. And that's, again, one of those gifts that we are all part of a team that no one wants to actively be a part of, but I know that we're all grateful to have regardless, because we're the ones that continue to talk. We're the ones who get to be here. Um, I'm actually looking in my office, and I was a big fan of Rent, um, the musical, when I was back in college for years and years and years. So I knew Jonathan Larson's story, and I actually had performed the opening monologue from Tick Tick Boom for my senior project in my acting class, and it plays differently for me now when I hear your Rent come on and on my phone. If I see a scene from Tick Tick Boom, it hits differently, and I have the poster um, up next to my computer so that it's a subtle reminder to me that the clock is ticking, and I don't take that time for granted as much as I used to. I've also struggled with the concept of the clock is ticking and I'm aware of it, and I beat myself up because I'm not doing more. I haven't accomplished what I want to accomplish in life, and that's one of those things where I was warned about that by several survivors, that to be grateful for the time and to try to make the most of that time, but not to That's the word for it. Don't beat yourself up for all the things that you haven't yet done. Marathon, not sprint. And I'm working on that. I'd love to think that I've suddenly become the Zen master and that I've got this all figured out, but I really haven't. I still struggle with this. It's an evolution. I will say that I definitely walked away from this whole experience feeling a better connection with a sense of the world, um, valuing life, and kind of it sort of recontextualized what I found to be important. A lot of things I would hold grudges about, or you know, be upset about. Now I kind of just see as moot. There are better things I can do with my time. Um, a lot of people ask me, did you see the white light? Did you see like family members? I'm like, I didn't technically die, guys. They put me in a event, so I mean, I was being artificially allowed to breathe, but I didn't see the lights. I didn't have the big afterlife experience. There was no Patrick Swayze ghost moment. It was not anything like that. Um, but I've been told by everyone like, oh, you must have, angels on your side. People are watching over you, and I'm like, well, I'm hoping I'm making them proud. I'm trying to do that every day. I'm trying to do something to make this all worth it. And that's where, even kind of just talking about it, I start to feel the emotion again. I'm trying to make the days count. Um, it was pretty early on. I think it was like the second day out from recovery. I'm sitting in my room by myself, and I think Saving Private Ryan was on the TV, and wasn't that particular scene, but I just kind of fast forwarded in my head, and it got me very emotional. But at the very end, you hear Tom Hanks saying, earn this, and that's sort of been in the back of my head ever since. You know, the absurdity of being in this one space by myself in a hospital filled with people who have lives going on around them, and there's life and death constantly, and I'm by myself in the dark, you know crying for not for insubstantial reasons, but not really understanding exactly the full magnitude of what I was wrestling with. But that concept of earning this, it's a double-edged sword. The gift is here. We're still alive. We still have the time. Um, so I'm doing my best to keep going, and to keep earning those extra hours. So there is PTSD. PTSD is another one of those unexpected side effects that I knew would probably crop up, and it crops up in weird ways. I would have events back at school. I went back to work after my dissection in December of 2016, so about 3.5 months after my dissection. And my therapist thought that it would be good for me to get in some kind of routine, thought it would be good before the holidays to kind of get myself reoriented to my job. And getting back to school, teaching is not an easy profession. For all the people who think, oh, well, they have summers off. Getting summer off doesn't help me in December when I'm trying to get reacclimated to 5:30 wake up calls and 7 o'clock class times, and it was an adjustment. Um, but there were definitely a couple of times where, as a film teacher, we've got videos being shot, and I've got events that I need to have staffing, and people are asking for special things they need done for their classes, and there's 15 different fires to get put out, and I could just feel myself, everything tightening and getting harder to breathe. And that's when I realized, like, oh, I think this is a panic attack. I knew that was a thing. They told me this might be a thing, but I'm pretty sure I'm experiencing a panic attack. I'm sweating up storm, and I had to kind of, like, I tell the kids, like, I need a second. I need to collect myself. Um, and sometimes there were moments where I knew going in, like, okay, I've got to be really careful to monitor this. And there's other times where I would have these minor panic attacks where I didn't know what would trigger it. I drove past my old apartment one day years later. This is probably 3 or 4 years after the dissection, and it was around Christmas time, so it's not like it was the anniversary. And I smelled smoke. Somebody was probably like lighting a fire in their house, and all of a sudden I just started to have this hyperventilating attack in my car. And I called up my wife and, like, I think I'm having a panic attack. I need to pull over. I'm going to be a little bit late. And you know walked through the coping mechanisms, but that one threw me for a loop. I'm like, I don't even know what triggered this. There's nothing going on. I had a good day. And that's the reason why having a support group and having people understand where you've been becomes so critical. I'm a extroverted introvert. I was an introvert. I became more extroverted, but at the end of the day, I'm still fairly self-contained. So sometimes it's hard for me to reach out and ask questions. And uh, out of necessity, now I'm asking these questions on these support groups and saying, like, has anybody felt this happen before? Please, can someone inform me? Uh, and that's what I'm kind of hoping, that from these videos, that maybe some of these experiences will ring true for other people. Um, the PTSD has gotten better over the years. I'm 39 now. I was 32 uh, when the dissection occurred, and I am able to function. I still have moments where the world comes crashing down, but there are ways of handling it that have made it easier to get by. Um, like I said, I still have a hard time explaining all of this to people who don't understand. There is that disconnect of, oh, well, it's a heart attack. So, no, it's not a heart attack. Completely different symptoms. Ironically, I think it was about a year after my surgery, I helped my students film a video for stroke awareness. And one of the nurses at a different hospital is like, well, this should be really familiar to you because I'd heard that you had some heart trouble. I'm like, oh man, you work at a hospital and you don't understand the difference. So there's a level of frustration there, but uh, that's why we are now ambassadors for the community. And maybe one day we'll finally get to retire because enough people will understand this, and there'll be different kinds of genetic treatment to prevent this from ever even being a thing. But for right now, we have to be the ones to speak for the people who haven't had their dissections yet, or the ones who weren't fortunate enough to get the extra time. So it's a weird sort of honor to have, um, and one to take seriously. Um, I'm a filmmaker. I'm a writer. So this whole experience has been oddly familiar. I know these story beats. It felt very cinematic at times, from the very beginning, being rushed into the hospital, moments of comedy and moments of drama. And I maybe I will tell a story with this someday. Maybe there will be a documentary about aortic dissection survivors. Maybe we need to get that out there. You know, I hope to speak with more people in person and get a camera rolling. Maybe I tell the story in a book someday and make sure people see it, because uh, it's a gift to still be here. Some days are harder than others. That is regardless of whether you had one dissection, two dissections, an aneurysm, what have you. But I will take the hard days if it means I get to have more of the good days too. That's my story.
Thank you for listening. Make sure you say that part.
Okay. Thank you for listening.
Right on. All right.